oftentimes he doesn't say, well, here's the solution. He is our solution. Like the problem doesn't always, very rarely goes away in that moment. But we learn that what we needed all along was just to remember he is with us and to remember he has not forgotten us. He has not forsaken his church. His spirit is still moving in us and among us. And he has a hope and a future for us if we will just stop working so hard on our own strength and remember him again.
Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we can make. We long to see the body of Christ look like Jesus. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. Our show is powered by you, the listener. So if you want to support the work that we do, get early access to episodes, episode guides, and more, go to patreon.com/shiftingculture to become a monthly patron so that we can continue in this important work. And don't forget to hit the follow button on your favorite podcast app to be notified when new episodes come out each week. And go leave a rating and review. It's easy. It only takes a second, and it helps us find new listeners to the show. Just go to the show page on the app that you're using right now and hit 5 stars. It really is that easy. Thank you so much. You know what else would help us out? Share this podcast with your friends, your family, your network. Tell them how much you enjoy it. Let them know that they should be listening as well. If you are new here, welcome. If you want to dig deeper, find us on social media at Shifting Culture Podcast, where I post video clips and quotes and interact with all of you. Previous guests on the show have included Andrew Root, Mike Frost, and Bree Mills. You can go back and listen to those episodes and more. But today's guest is Mandy Smith. I'm so excited to have Mandy back on the podcast, this time to talk about her latest book, Confessions of an Amateur Saint, the Christian leader's journey from self-sufficiency to reliance on God. Dr. Mandy Smith is the pastor of St. Lucia United Church in Brisbane, Australia, and author of The Vulnerable Pastor and Unfettered. Mandy teaches for D-Min programs at the Eugene Peterson for Christian Imagination and Fuller Seminary. Mandy and her husband, Jamie, a New Testament professor, live in their parsonage where the teapot is always warm. In this episode, Mandy Smith shares an ancient vision for pastoral leadership, one that acknowledges human weakness and relies on God's strength. Mandy unpacks the problems with Western secular approaches to ministry that has crept into the church, and she proposes a reorientation towards confession and lament and trusting in the work of the Holy Spirit, rather than just relying on our own strengths and strategies and efforts. Mandy vulnerably shares personal stories of feeling overwhelmed in ministry and how the practice of confession and emptying herself before God has led to renewal and a deeper sense of His presence. She emphasizes the importance of measuring success, not by numbers, but by transformed lives and the overflowing of God's Spirit. This conversation offers a compelling vision for a different kind of pastoral leadership, one that is deeply rooted in faith rather than secular models. So Mandy's insights challenge us to get out of the way and let God work in and through us in powerful ways. Here is my conversation with Mandy Smith. Mandy, welcome back to Shifting Culture. Excited to have you on again.
So good to be with you again.
Good. I'm excited about this book, Confessions of an Amateur Saint, and what you write about. And you are proposing a new way to lead, or a good way to lead in pastoral ministry and leading by faith. What do you see as really the problem? Where have we gone off the rails in our pastoral leadership, and what is the problem that you see?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you kind of stopped after saying a new way to lead, because I would say it's an ancient way to lead, and the way that God chose leaders throughout all of Scripture. And honestly, the way that I think that minority leaders still lead today. So people who are outside of the kind of Western complex of church, So yeah, I think this problem is primarily a contemporary Western Christianity concern that has come up during, since the Industrial Revolution kind of days, and since the Enlightenment and all that kind of stuff, where we have become very scientific, we've become very trusting in our own selves and in our own ingenuity. We're used to having systems and structures, and And what I came to realize was how secular we are, really. I mean, I think we're all realizing that we're bringing models from outside of the church, which are really helpful in their own ways, but aren't fundamentally based on the assumption that there is a God who ultimately is doing the work, who is working through us. Even the work that we do is his work. So I just started to notice I've been in ministry for a long time. I'm a person of faith. I've been following Jesus for a very long time. And still, it's really good for us to acknowledge that we have been shaped by our secular culture. Our education has also taught us, like, when you want to do something well, you work really hard and you take it all on your own shoulders. And our professional training has also taught us that to be a professional is for us to have all the answers. Like, we are a piece of the machine that you plug in to fix a problem. That's what a professional does. And so I started feeling in myself, I've been through some pretty intense kind of personal and ministry situations the last couple of years. And every single day has felt like this is impossible. And so what you do in those crisis moments really just reveals what you think truly is your source of hope and power. And so I started paying attention to those moments because, we have all these headlines at the moment about all these horrible things, stupid decisions church leaders are making. And I think we need to hold people accountable. And I think we need to rethink our structures and our expectations of leadership. And at the same time, what I'm more interested in, because I don't think that those people are inherently evil. I think any of us put in those situations will probably do some of the same things. So what I'm really interested in is the moment way before it hits the headlines, way before we do the stupid thing that breaks the whole church into pieces. Those little moments, like Jesus in the wilderness being tempted, that like, oh, the person who I really trusted in the church has just left and is blaming me, or I've got a really major crisis in my personal life and I don't know how to manage that while I'm also leading people, or I've got to preach a sermon on Sunday and I don't understand this Bible passage, or someone's asking me to carry a burden with them and it's breaking my heart and I don't know how to help them be strong. Like every single day, every moment in leadership, we are faced with things that are actually too much for us. And if we bring a secular approach to professionalism to them, we think, oh, okay, this sense of my inadequacy is a sign that I just have to work harder. I just have to stress out. I just have to buy another book, go to another conference, get another degree, whatever our temptation is. And the ancient way of leading is to say, yeah, this is impossible. We're in our weakness, God is strong. And to lead, like, I'm learning it's a professional skill for us to actually be able to say, this is too much for us. And to not be surprised by it anymore. And like, I actually find myself laughing and being like, oh my goodness, this is so far beyond me. It's laughable. God's going to have to really do some amazing stuff here. Like, let's watch and see what he does. So that is a professional skill, to be the person in the room who leads, who knows, like, oh man, things just hit the fan. This is when we pray. That is a professional skill, So that's a long answer to your question, but I think that's a big part of where our problem is.
I think that's spot on. So take me into a moment where you felt like it was impossible. You don't have the answer to a situation. And what was your first instinct because of the way that you have been trained as pastor? And where did you go, oh, maybe I have to change direction?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, it might be not typical because, different personalities and genders and backgrounds have different kind of places to go. We have fight and flight and freeze and fawn and all of these things, and I'm actually realizing how our trauma is triggered by ministry on a pretty regular basis. And so my temptation is to freeze or to fawn. So how can I just please you? How can I just make all this go away by, going in the direction of whatever everybody else wants me to do? And in a way that seems very pastoral. And, of course, it's our job to empty ourselves and to surrender to the Lord and to, serve other people. Of course. But in times like this, the church is in such a time of upheaval and change. And I think it's a beautiful moment for a pioneering kind of leadership. I think all of us are pioneers now. And that means sometimes we're going to have to do things that not everybody's happy with. and I'm not comfortable in that situation myself. So how do I lead other people through their discomfort when I'm also feeling the discomfort of, I feel like it's time to do something different, but I don't know what that is. But I'm going to cast a vision for it anyway, and I'm feeling called to go in this direction. And you know, so I've had various moments of just feeling like the Lord is saying, do you want to listen to me more than other people, or are you going to listen to them? Like in this situation, you're going to have to make the choice, you know. So, you know, that's one of the many ways that I talk about just being aware of our kind of knee-jerk reactions to crisis. But you know, I think it can look like many different things in many different situations, and many of them are turning away from God, having this moment of choice of, am I going to draw on myself? Fundamentally, I think that's the basic choice. Whatever it looks like in our actual behaviors and thinking, the choice is, this feels impossible. Am I going to disconnect from God again, or am I going to connect to God again? Do I really believe he's the source of everything I need right now? And this is Jesus talking about the vine and the branches, you know, like a branch that pulls itself off the vine is going to wither and die. And I think we see that in our own lives. We see that in our churches and denominations that, you know, I don't think that God has actually forsaken us. I believe the gospel is still good news and the Spirit is still working. And so when we're withering and dying as individuals and as communities, I want to say, like, okay, where are we getting our life from? I think it's a diagnostic, not to be judgmental, but it's a good diagnostic to just kind of think, okay, if God promises to be the source of all creativity, all flourishing, all fruitfulness, not that it's always perfect or we always get along or whatever, but the kingdom of God is a place that brings life. And if we don't see life among us and in us, then it's a good diagnostic.
I think it's a great diagnostic. I mean, I look around a lot of organizations and churches, and it looks like you can lead and do the organizational work of a church or an organization that has Jesus in the name without actually invoking any faith or Jesus at all. It just seems like it's just a natural, easy way. We'll just lead, and then we'll slap on a prayer at the beginning or the end, and we'll call it faith. It just feels normal and easy. Even when it's, you know, difficult, of course, to lead. So what does a reorientation look like then? If everything needs to be flipped on its head, if this Western cultural CEO idea of business that came into the church, if it needs to be flipped on its head, what's the reorientation for us and just the heart posture that we need to take every day as we walk into our situation?
Yeah. And oftentimes when this kind of reorientation comes up, people think I'm saying, oh, we don't have to hone our skills or be good at what we do. Like, please hear me say, like, I still work really hard to be the best communicator I can be, to figure out how to lead meetings and how to cast vision. Like, of course, we need to be honing our skills. We still need to be professional in that sense. But at the same time, it's skills that grow from our faith, not just like the faith is tacked on after we've tried our best. So to answer your question, I actually just saw a post on social media recently that I've been really reflecting on, and it was somebody quoting some pretty scary statistics about the state of the church. And then they said, you know, we're really going to have to get the best and the brightest in a room to figure this out. And it's going to take, we don't know what it's going to mean, but it's going to mean a lot of work and a lot of strategy, basically. I don't think they used the word strategy, but that was what they were kind of implying. And I was actually deeply disturbed by that as the first response. So I think the posture, the good thing is we actually have so much fodder for what we need here because we have desperation. And we don't like that feeling of feeling in over our heads, of seeing the charts always with this downward curve when it's like watching our own local congregations or our denominations or the church around the Western world, at least, we're always seeing this decline, and that's not fun to see. And we're feeling in over our heads because we're having to lead in a way that, is reimagining things even as we're sustaining organizations, and it's exhausting. So I think it's really good to actually name. We already feel desperate, and what we do with that desperation can make the difference between going towards God or away from God. Because throughout history, I think revival has often come from times of desperation. And so the secular thing to do with desperation is to think, oh, we just got to work harder. We just got to, get the best people in a room and figure this out, Jesus got some of the worst people in the room. Not the worst, but he found the folks who had the most open heart and started with them. And so what if in our desperation, we actually kind of stop to remember, there's a different thing we can do with our desperation. It's not maybe what our culture has shaped us to do with desperation, because we're usually ashamed of desperation. So we don't even name it. We just skip straight into panic and hypervigilance and all of the strategizing and whatever else. Some of us freak out. Some of us freeze. Some of us get overwhelmed. Some of us just work even harder. Some of us abuse one another. All of those are understandable, but not what I think is actually called for in this moment, which is just to go back to the Psalms, to cry out to the Lord from the places that feel like God has forsaken us, to even say, are you listening, Lord? Where are you? We need you. My children don't follow. My church is falling apart. I don't know how to lead when the culture is always changing. All of the things. What if the Lord longs to hear those cries from us? And it feels, oh my goodness, it just feels like you're going to die. It's not a good feeling to actually name the crisis. But as we see in Scripture, every single psalm, or almost every psalm that begins with that kind of crying out, turns to praise. And I don't think it's just by choice. I think it's because it's therapeutic to actually release to the Lord all of our anxieties and pain, and to trust. Oftentimes he doesn't say, well, here's the solution. He is our solution. The problem doesn't always, very rarely goes away in that moment. But we learn that what we needed all along was just to remember he is with us, and to remember he has not forgotten us. He has not forsaken his church. His Spirit is still moving in us and among us, and he has a hope and a future for us if we will just stop working so hard on our own strength and remember him again, And so in a way, it's hopeful that the crisis actually holds within it the opportunity to teach us the very thing that we need, which is to just say, Lord, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. And I have found, this is not theoretical, there is a renewal happening in me over the past 10 years or so. And my writing usually comes from this, with The Vulnerable Pastor and Unfettered, and now with Confessions of an Amateur Saint. These are stories of the renewal that has come in me from my own desperation and crying out to the Lord in places that feel impossible. And I'm seeing it in my own congregation. I'm seeing it in other people around me. So I'm not just saying, well, I read some history books that say revival comes from desperation. I'm seeing it in myself. And then I went to read the history to say, oh, okay, it's not just me, So that's good news.
It is good news. I think a lot of times when we have a crisis and we see the crisis, we see declining attendance at the church, whatever it is, we want to control things and hold on to the last vestiges that we do have. And so we do work in our own strength. You aptly titled your book, Confessions of an Amateur Saint. What is that role then when we're trying to control, instead of control, what's the role of confession? Confession, and how does that help us give things to God and lean on him rather than our own strength and our own abilities?
Yeah. Yeah, so the book is actually about 40 different confessions that came from me when I was just going to that place of desperation. So, working in a pretty intense ministry context, every single morning I would just go down to the riverbank, which thankfully is very close to my home, and just kind of, it felt like vomiting, honestly, just like naming all the things that feel impossible, because if I don't do that, I'm just functioning out of them without being self-aware and not bringing the Lord into them. And so the confession is a way, it's kind of a double-edged confession, two meanings to the word. That confession is confessing the sin of disconnection from God. I actually don't sin in a lot of the like really juicy vice kinds of sins. So it sometimes has made me feel like the church doesn't always talk to me, but I absolutely sin all the time in the way that Adam and Eve did. Like they weren't going to parties or doing all the things that we talk about. I mean, they were just seeing something else as the source of their hope, disconnecting from God. And of course, just like that vine, the branch dries up if it disconnects. And so I'm confessing every way I'm tempted to look to something else apart from God to be the hope in the crisis. And a confession, so the second kind of confession then is a confession of faith, of saying, I'm choosing once more, I don't see it yet, God, but I'm choosing to trust you're still here. I'm choosing to trust you're still powerful. I'm choosing to trust you have a way forward. So each one of those comes from a different kind of place. And I've named each confession based on how I was feeling at the time, so that folks can read the book front to back, but they also can just find those confessions based on, oh, okay, I'm feeling in over my head, or I'm feeling discouraged, or whatever. And just read that 1 or 2 pages of being like, oh, not because I think my confessions are better than anybody else's, just because I need somebody to model that for me. And so, I didn't set out to write a book when I was writing these. It was just it was kind of my journaling every morning after my walk, where I was just like, I've got to get this out. I've got to say to the Lord, I see now how I was tempted by all these other things that promise to be something that cannot be you to me. And I'm choosing to turn to you once more. So that then later on in the day, when that thing hits me in the face, when I'm in the meeting that is making me feel that way again, I've already named, this is going to be how I choose to respond here. And I think this is how leadership is not abusive, at least as much as it can be. When we're aware of those little temptations and we deal with them in our personal walk with the Lord, then when we're leading other people, we're not surprised when we feel in over our head. And we're like, oh, I know what to do with this again. I've been practicing this in my prayer life this morning, Yeah.
In chapter 3, you write about, you title it, I Want to Force Miracles. And I think a lot of us want to do the thing that we can do so that God will act. We're not very good at just like waiting for God to act and being with people in the moment and their pain and suffering and sorrow. How do we start to wait in the midst of that and not try and force God's hand, even though, prayer does work, like all of that stuff happens and it works, but it's not really up to us. It's not a formula that we could do. It's not. And so what's that posture for us when the miracles aren't happening and coming?
Oh, yep. Oh, absolutely. This is actually one of my greatest sins, I think, because I do have a good imagination and I can imagine these amazing things God could do. And so then I'm like, right, here's the plan, God, wouldn't this be cool? Go, And he's like, haha, yeah, that's a nice idea, Mandy. And then I get mad with him for not following my plan, and then I get, like Jonah under the tree, be like, why didn't you do it my way? I'm feeling sorry for myself. So I totally get it. Like I wrestle with this all the time. And in a way, it's the way that the enemy uses our faith, because we could believe amazing things could happen, but the question is, which amazing things? And I love Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he helps me learn how to have a big imagination, but still release the outcomes to God. So this prayer of his is another model prayer that we don't turn to as often as the Lord's Prayer, where he says, Father, all things are possible with you. Like, this is a relationship. This is Father. And this is not about whether God can do this or not. And then he says, take this cup from me. He's just honest. He's like, this is what I want. And I think we're often afraid to actually say what we want with the Lord. But then he finishes the prayer by saying, but not my will, but yours be done. And so what a beautiful posture that you can just acknowledge God can do everything and God is our Father. We are able to say, this is what I want. And then we're able to say, you hold on to that. This is on you, you know. And so I often sum that up by saying, I don't know what God will do, but I know what God can do. So it's good language to just name this in-between place of like, I'm not going to play it safe by not asking God for anything or expecting miracles, but I'm also not going to force God's hand in exactly what the miracles should be. And so it's good. It's good because then I'm not as afraid to say, I'm going to pray for healing for this person. I don't know what that's going to look like. I'm going to trust that God can renew this congregation, even though that's hard for me to imagine right now. I'm going to trust that God can redeem this brokenness in this family. Like, I'm going to say, God can do it. I don't know what he will do, you know? And so that helps me to kind of like go out on the limb of the branch, you know, or the edge of the branch. That's just like, this is really scary. Like, I'm feeling sick to my stomach just saying this. I'm a person who likes safety and security. But following Jesus doesn't actually promise us that. So yeah, I think it's good to acknowledge how hard it is because God does ask us to ask for miracles. And I see us at the moment kind of having a repentance from our grandiose ideas and then having very small expectations. And I think, you know, the Bible says every knee will bow and every tongue confess. The Bible says, I'm making all things new. Like, I think we're called to have a really big imagination, but at the same time, Jesus talks about mustard seeds and yeast. Like, our job is to just attend to those little things. And every single miraculous thing that I've ever seen has come from an unexpected place with just being all I can do as one human being is be attentive to the little things that come my way every day. And so that's actually been a real grace when I've felt so in over my head that there's actually a moment when I turn from the riverbank every morning and I'm like, okay, I'm going back to my day now, Lord. And the first couple of steps back up the hill, I just say, just tell me, I'm just going to do the next good thing. I'm already saying yes to you, whatever it is. I'm just going to do what you put in front of me today. That's all anybody can do, you know? And so while I think it is good for us to have 5-year plans and all that kind of thing, as a person following Jesus, as just an ordinary follower, he never gives me that kind of detail of the future. Like, he might say something kind of fuzzy about like, what if we went somewhere like that one day, you know? Get your heart ready for maybe a change or maybe a new thing. Like, it's never like, it's going to go this. And 5 years from now, you're going to be here. You know, like, why do we expect that from him in leading us as congregations, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to say you can't do that. I mean, I guess that's really helpful. It's good to have some ideas, but the problem is once you've got the plan, you stop talking to God. Like the way that I'm leading, where I'm like, next thing, Lord, okay, what's the next thing, Lord? It requires me to be asking him every single step of the way and checking back with him. Because once you might pray for a bit, discern as an eldership or something, like what is the direction of the church? You set the 5-year plan, you set all the steps of the 5-year plan. Do you ever go back again and say to the Lord, are we still on track? Is this still the plan? Do you still want us to head there? Oftentimes we don't. And I think maybe we might be making plans so that we don't have to keep asking. And that's kind of not a good feeling to be dependent on something beyond yourself.
Man, you know? if I think of businesses put in 5-year plans, they could see, you know, they have these measurable outcomes, and you know, we could see, all right, our finances are going up month over month. We're seeing some measurements, and we could scale our business and move them forward. Those 5-year plans, you know, sometimes work. In the church, if you're saying that we're praying for miracles, It may not happen. I need to be attentive to the little things that come my way every single day, the small things. What then is success in the kingdom of God? What are we looking for? What are we measuring?
Yeah.
What is the outcome that we're seeking?
Yeah, absolutely. And it may not be my congregation grows to be 3,000 people. It may be my congregation equips 100 people who are all at university at the moment, and they go and each empower 30 other people throughout the course of their life. I may never know about that, And so it's an open-handedness, but absolutely, like it's stories, it's people's lives being transformed that I'm measuring. And so, there definitely is fruit. Jesus talks about fruit. We get to see fruit. It's not always what we would have expected, but I think a lot of our work is, I've been really inspired by the parable of the different kinds of soils. And I've just noticed how the seed just naturally wants to grow. There's no question about whether the seed is good or not. And also the sower is kind of just really like careless almost. Like he's just throwing this stuff everywhere.
He's just throwing it everywhere.
Yeah, there's no scarcity of seed. The seed wants to grow. The question is if it's landing in the right place or not. And so I've realized a lot of our work is to just clear the way, shoo away the birds, dig up the roots, dig out the stones and the thorns, and in our personal lives and in our communities, which means pruning and purging. Like that's not fun stuff. But if we trust that the Spirit of God naturally wants to grow and reproduce, doesn't always scale. It reproduces, so there's a difference there. I don't actually believe that a Christian community functioning really relationally can scale. Once you get past a certain number of people, you have to start employing people to do all the work that volunteers or, that people used to do out of their servanthood. That's fine. My husband calls that a parachurch organization, not a church. but a church reproduces. Like once you get to, I don't know what it is, 250, whatever it is, you have to start having different kinds of models. That doesn't scale. It inherently changes once you get past a certain number of people because the relationships can't hold it anymore. So what if then that's the time to reproduce? That's the way the kingdom seems to work, So, to just give you an example, I am watching faces light up. Like that's what I'm measuring, relationships being healed, homes being healed, people going from, like there's one woman in particular whose face I'm seeing right now, who I've been walking with for the last couple of years, who could hardly get out of bed. She just was under a cloud, and her face, her eyes were so dark, so clouded, and she could hardly look me in the face when I first met her because of just years and years of abuse trying to take her life. She had been in hospital. I don't know what to call it anymore. We shouldn't call it mental health institution. I can't remember what the right word is, but for depression, anxiety, suicide, she'd been institutionalized for a very, very long time. The doctor had tried every kind of treatment, her psychiatrist, and had actually discharged her because he had given up on her. He said, "You're going to kill yourself anyway, so there's nothing else I can do for you." That was when I met her. And I don't mean to laugh. I'm laughing because I know what came next. And to watch the way, she says all I did the first time we met was read to her Psalm 139 and say, "This is what I believe about you." Like I wasn't doing anything remarkable, although I was tempted to. Like when she told me her story, I was like, oh my goodness, Lord, I don't know what to do. And I'm so grateful that I stopped to think. I think this confessing practice probably was what had helped me be ready for this moment, because as a professional person, I thought, I haven't got what it takes to fix her. She is so far gone. I can't in my own strength help her. And that I was tempted to just do a bunch of stuff that would have made me feel successful as a professional person. And I'm so glad that something in the moment just made me stop and say, Lord, what on earth am I supposed to do here? And I just felt a prompt from him saying, just tell her what you believe about her. And so I just said, I believe your life has worth. I believe God made you for a reason. I believe he loves you. And then once I was done saying that, I felt him say Psalm 139. So I just read that to her. That's all I did. Like any human being could do that. You don't have to be amazing to do that. And she says she felt electricity. We were just talking on the phone even. We weren't even in person. She felt like electricity was coming through the phone and like awakening her whole body. I wasn't doing that. And I could hear the difference. I've never heard such a sudden change in somebody's voice before. And she loves telling this story. And so not only did I get to baptize her and watch her like go through, of course, there's been so much therapy and so much prayer and so much struggling to get her to a better place. But now she's feeling called to share this with other people. She's feeling called to go back to her village in the Philippines and teach them all how to pray, take Bibles to them. She went back a few months ago and not only is she just feeling full, but it's overflowing. And that's, I think, what I trust in. To come back to your question, I trust that this healing power doesn't, and because I've found it in my own experience, this healing power doesn't only fill us, it fills us to overflowing. And it can't be kept in. And so, I mean, we see this with the woman at the well. She's like, I need to tell everybody, and so that's where the miracles come. That's where the reproduction comes, that I trust that spirit. So if we take the time just to be human, just to be with people, just to share our stories with them and to remind them who they are, we can trust that there's a power that's beyond our own that is doing that healing work in people and that will fill them to overflowing, multiplying.
That's beautiful. My question then for us, I think there's two questions in the story of the things that you were just sharing. One, what does it do to us and the posture that we take in the world when some of our metrics are stories and not just numbers? And, because stories are people and God's about people. Numbers are just numbers on a page, and they do represent people, but we don't often think about people when we think about numbers. So what does that do to us and the way that we lead and facilitate and be in our community?
And I should say, like, there is a reason why we need to count numbers. Of course, we need to be able to make plans for people whether it comes to like how many leaders do we need to have in the church or whatever. Like, there's a reason why we do count numbers. I don't want to be a reactionary person there. And I should say too, like, this congregation is actually growing. Like, Jesus actually did have crowds. There were people, many, many people who wanted to respond to him. But I think actually what I'm finding personally is that it's healing my own vision of how God sees me as well, So it's easy for us to feel like just cogs in the machine, that God just plugs us in and says, like, flicks the on switch and leaves us, and it's healing my idea. I'm trying to learn a lot about theosis and this concept of God in us, beyond a concept, a way of understanding what we read in Scripture, that when Jesus left the earth in that bodily form, he said, you're going to do things that I can't do because I'm giving you my spirit. And so it's just expanding my imagination for this possibility that God's spirit, the spirit that spoke creation into existence, the spirit that rose Jesus from the dead, is actually working in our bodies, equipping us and guiding us and encouraging us And there's a lot of ways that we talk that actually disturb me. That's kind of like, I don't know, it almost feels like a false kind of humility of like, oh no, like God's out there, God's doing amazing things. I'm here doing my thing, trying to follow God as much as I can, but I don't know, we almost want to keep him at arm's length a little bit. Like, it's very humbling to think, even here, even in this broken heart, even in this limited body, even with all of my baggage, like, I don't feel good enough to be the place where that God wants to live. And that God's like, that is the place where I reveal myself to you and to the world. That's where I long to be. Like, something, I think Jesus' story is actually supposed to be about the miracle that happens when human being is united with God again. Like, not just, oh, wasn't that nice in the Garden of Eden, they got to be united with God, or won't that be nice one day in heaven, we'll get to be united with God. No, the good news is right now that God's spirit is united with my spirit every single moment if I say yes to him. That's salvation. That's hope. Like, and so I've got a quote on my desk from William Booth, who I believe was the founder of the Salvation Army, or a part of the Salvation Army's founding. He says, I'm not waiting on a move of God, I am a move of God. And at first that strikes you as like, well, who do you think you are? But so is everybody, you know. If this is so, it's quite strange when we're trying to recover from our ego, platform, celebrity, pastor stuff. But when we empty of ourselves, this kind of confession is an emptying process. It's a way of saying, I want to clear out the rocks. I want to clear out the weeds. I want to clear out, shoo away the birds of everything that's keeping this from growing in me. And when the ground is clear, it's hard for me to tell the difference between me and God. Like, there's a way that he partners and reveals himself to the world in a way that's just me, you know, and just you. How beautiful is that? I put something on. Yeah, I wrote something recently that I'm still thinking about, or I said something like, it makes no sense that the more I give myself to Jesus, the more I give my life to Jesus, the more Mandy I become. You know, and that's true for all of us. That's hopeful to me, and that's something I hope you can see. Like, that lights up my face. That's really good news, and I think that's contagious. People are like, what is going on there? I want whatever that is, you know.
Yes. So then if now you're giving yourself up, you are emptying yourself, you're confessing, you're saying, all right, dig up these weeds, clear out the rocks, shoo away the birds. Let's make room for the Spirit of God. Now, the Spirit of God is within you, even when all the other junk is there. So what is that? Then, because after that is the overflowing of the Spirit, right, in you. So you have all the fruits of the Spirit get to come out. So when crisis hits and when things go, I mean, you're looking at patience and you're looking at joy and love that comes out instead of, control and abuse and neglect. So what is that work? Is it something where we just don't remember that he's with us, the Spirit is with us? Or like, why don't we recognize that the Spirit is with us all the time, every day? I had spiritual direction this morning, in my spiritual, and he said, hey, how do you feel? I was like, and who is Jesus to you now? And the only thing I could say is with, like, he's with me. And I just, like, I feel his presence and I don't have to do anything to feel it. And that's where, you know, I want to get people there, because I feel more of like who I am than I've ever felt before right now. And how do we get to the truth of who you are? How do we start to throw that away, like get rid of all the junk that's already in there so we could recognize that the Spirit is there already?
Absolutely. That is such a good question, isn't it? I think it is helpful for us to pray, come Lord, come Spirit, as a way of remembering we are wanting it. We are choosing God's Spirit. But I do get concerned that we think the Spirit comes and goes based on whether we feel the Spirit or not. And so, it's a good question. I actually do a kind of an emptying prayer based on the passage in 2 Corinthians 4 of in our weakness, or we have this treasure in jars of clay, that it's helpful to kind of remember the fact that we are this jar of clay, that oftentimes that's where the shame comes from, that's where the desperation comes from, that we feel our limitation, just in normal life and also as leaders. And I think this is where the enemy wants to come and accuse us. This is what he was doing in the wilderness with Jesus, of like, look at how big your mission is. Can't distract you from the mission. I'm just going to tempt you to do it for the wrong reasons and in the wrong way. I'm going to show you how big your mission is and how limited you are. You're just a little person with 2 feet and one little voice. And I think he was tempting Jesus to be ashamed of his humanness. And I love the fact that Jesus was refusing to be ashamed of what it meant to be one small human for a time. And I think he was more willing to be human than we are. So this is a moment every single time where we feel in over our heads. And I think that our culture has all kinds of extra shame since the Industrial Revolution, where we're comparing ourselves to robots and machines and not human things. We're comparing ourselves to perfect humans who've been photoshopped and all the stuff that's not actually human. Now we've got AI. Oh my goodness. So, so we're not, so the enemy is holding up against us in our moment of shame, in our moment of feeling, I'm just a clay vessel. I'm fragile. I'm limited. I'm weak. I'm ordinary. The enemy is like, look at how shameful you are. Look at all these things that you should be. This is not the voice of God. And for us to be able to be in that place and not, I often imagine in this emptying prayer that I do, I imagine that I'm this clay vessel, and I just try to sit with the ordinariness of it and the emptiness of it and the fragility of it, and not be ashamed of it, and be aware of how when I feel so empty, I just try to fill it up with all this just chunks of stuff, whatever that is, just trying to I imagine like I've just got chunks of concrete and I just shove them in there just so that I feel less empty, but they're not actually helping. They're all my efforts to feel like I'm enough to deal with the shame of how I'm not as cool as everybody else, or I'm not as clever or whatever, And so the emptying prayer is just sitting with that emptiness, that ordinariness of the clay vessel, naming all the junk that I've put in there, and choosing one at a time to just hold it out to the Lord and say, oh, I'm sorry, I've tried, I'm doing this again. Here are the things I'm reaching for instead of you, to just fill up this emptiness, to be something that is not what you're asking me to be. And then I visualize in the bottom of this clay vessel, there's a little tiny puddle of gold, like molten gold, because, we have a treasure in this clay jar. And I always imagine it like there's a scene in one of the Lord of the Rings movies that there's just this molten gold that's just like filling and flowing. And so I imagine in the bottom of this, now all the Lord of the Rings fans have gone off on another tangent. Come back to me. We're back in this clay vessel. So, I imagine that there's just been a little puddle that's just kind of been cramped there. Like you say, it's always there. But this treasure just been cramped out by all the junk that we try to put in there. And as we empty, and I found this by accident. I was just emptying because I knew it was a Christ-like posture. I wasn't actually expecting there'd be something that filled after the emptying. But that's where I started to notice there's a new power, there's a new something available to me that is not me. That this molten gold now just has more space to fill when we get rid of all the junk. And I like to imagine that, it fills this clay vessel, it seals up all the cracks, it just nourishes, like it satisfies as it fills. And I just imagine, like, I just say yes to it, and it fills me and wants to overflow. And And so that's a visual that I think is very scriptural from 2 Corinthians 4 that I think is what I'm doing when I'm emptying, trusting that, yes, the Spirit is already there. I have got in the way of it, but it's always available if I will just get out of the habit of doing all these other things instead of seeking the Lord. And I see the power of that at work.
Maybe it's my own bias and the way that I think. But when we're having a conversation, I think about me doing it, I doing it. I think about individual.
Yeah.
It's just the way that I think. But how then does this work communally? This confession, so that we can get out of the way and we could let God act and we could give it to Him. What is the communal aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's always this strange interplay, isn't there? Because we don't want it to be just about ourselves. And I think in some ways we have this kind of knee-jerk reaction or overreaction to the abuses of it being just me and God. I think right now we're becoming aware in the church that we can be very self-centered in our personal little faith world, that then we go to like, oh, it's never about me. So how do we do both at the same time, trusting that any community is made up of a bunch of individuals who are personally following God? And the only thing that I know how to do is share the goodness of what God is doing. And, one of the books that I found really helpful in all of this is a book called Preaching as Testimony. And she's naming the fact that in a post-Christian context where we are skeptical of grand narratives that say this is true for everybody, and we're over the abusive ways of kind of arguing about faith and telling everybody exactly what doctrine they should believe. There is this ancient practice of bearing witness, which is not just telling a nice story about myself. It's saying what I have seen and what I believe about it. And so that is an ancient practice. And Revelation says, we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb. That's pretty powerful stuff. And the word of our testimony. Like, we don't normally put that right up there with powerful things like the blood of the Lamb, The word of our testimony is powerful, is an overcoming force. And so, we've seen this in some of the outpouring at Asbury and many of the renewals over the years, that it often begins with human repentance, with human confession, with human lament, and with human testimony, sharing, here is the story of the good God who is working in my life. And it's so beautiful. I've had to really wrestle with this, with writing, because oftentimes I feel called to write pretty personal stories. The Vulnerable Pastor had to be a vulnerable book, but I'm a pretty introverted person. I don't want to be telling everybody all my failures. And so I really had to wrestle with the Lord about how I was going to write a vulnerable book about vulnerability, because it's really uncomfortable. And I really felt this kind of invitation to remember, like, my favorite music, my favorite art. They're people just sharing their own experience. And somehow, there are ways that you can do that in a really selfish way, or a way that's drawing attention to yourself. But if you're just offering it as a gift, there's this crazy way that a song that somebody wrote out of their heartbreak and their story, which is so different from my story, because we're all humans and we all have the same kinds of experiences, I find my story and their story. I think we're really good at doing that. We all know how to find our own story in the story of others. We all want to know, we're not alone. We all experience these things. And so when somebody stands up and shares their testimony from their particular age and personality and life experience, something of the Spirit moves in all of us, even though we have very different experiences. And we've all seen that. We've all seen that work. And so we have to, once again, trust that even though we're starting with something that feels very small, that's, the kingdom is yeast. And it does do powerful work in ways that we may not be able to control or understand or measure. But once that yeast is kneaded into the dough, there's no getting it out. Like, good luck to anybody who doesn't want yeast in that flour, because it's there now and it's going to transform everything.
It will transform everything.
Yeah.
Mandy, if you had a hope for your readers, the people who pick up your book, what would you hope that they would get?
I would just hope that they would feel less alone, that they would, I think a lot of folks now see that there's a problem in the church and in the world. And I think my hope for there being a better way forward is what motivated me to write. So I hope that instead of, we have a lot of conversations at the moment and books and whatever about the problem. I guess my prayer would be that there's a new vision of like, there are other possibilities. Not that my book is the only way forward, but that it might be a little glimpse of like, there is a way forward. There is a future for us. Yeah.
It's great. So how could people go out and get your book?
Yes.
Where would you like to point people to?
Yeah. So I don't know when the podcast is going live, but the book comes out in October. Before then, you can pre-order it, and it's on Amazon. It's on the Nav Press website. I also try to direct people to Hearts and Minds Bookstore, which is an independent Christian bookstore in Pennsylvania. They do stuff online too, so you can see their store online. And those are the best places to get it. My website is called thewayistheway.org. MandySmith.org will also get you there, but I usually don't tell people that. But that's easy to remember. I don't like the whole idea of that, But it might be easier to remember than The Way is the Way. And also, actually, I do have a video on there of the prayer practice that I mentioned, the emptying prayer. So maybe I'll share a link with you as well that you can put in the show notes for people who want to do a guided kind of meditation of that.
Excellent. Well, Mandy, thank you for this conversation. It was
so good to be
joy.
With you. Yeah.
And man, I loved it. And you exude love and grace in this conversation and who you are. And so thank you for doing that work of emptying yourself and letting the Spirit of God be with you. And it was wonderful.
God bless you and all of your listeners. Yeah. Good things are
Thank
instable.
You, yes. Amen. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you want to see more episodes like this, go to patreon.com/shiftingculture and become a monthly patron of the show. You can help us produce more episodes so that we can see the body of Christ look more like Jesus. If you become a patron on patreon.com/shiftingculture, you will get early access to episodes. You will get episode guides. You will get bonus shows, hopefully, and more. So go to patreon.com/shiftingculture and become a monthly patron. Also, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps us out and helps us find new listeners to the show. And just go and share this podcast with your friends, your family, your network, people that you think would enjoy it as well. Thank you again for listening to the show. I hope you have a great week.